The LA Clippers have had a lot of interesting teams in their history, a lot of bad ones, recently some very good ones. But what's the most underrated team in the history of the LA Clippers? Going to be joined by a special diehard Clipper fan to talk about who that team is on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. If you're listening to this right now, that means I am in Qatar. And sadly, I will not be able to give you updated Clipper news and podcasts. I will be back soon. But for today's episode, a very special one I've planned for a while, talking the most underrated team in Clipper history. And joining me today is Chris Wylde of the LA Clipcast Podcast, a diehard Clipper fan in his own right. Chris, welcome to the show. We've been talking about this for a while. It's finally good to do it.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. First of all, I love a great crossover, not just Jamal Crawford, but anytime Magnum PI would be on Murder, She Wrote or something, or like if there was a CSI case that went from Vegas to New York to Miami, I love a good crossover. So I'm calling this Locked On Clipcast, if you don't mind.
There we go. I'll take that all day. So let's get right into it. The most underrated team in Clipper history, why they were so endearing to Clipper fans and why they failed, I guess, ultimately. I guess to the expectations, they didn't fail. But
well, they failed the ultimate goal, right? But they got better than they've ever done in franchise history. And we are, of course, talking about the 2006 Los Angeles Clippers, helmed by, I think, the most underrated Clipper coach ever, Mike Dunleavy.
So let me ask you, just before we start talking about the 05-06 team, are they the most underrated Clipper team in history to you? Because you've been a Clipper fan longer than me. If you've got any teams, from the 90s maybe, or maybe the early 2000s, I think a lot of people in recent history would go with the 2019 team, but I don't think they're considered underrated. I think at this point, the Clipper fan base has grown, and that team has gained a lot of, love from Clipper fans. The Clipper fans love that team.
Well, I'll tell you something. So I think the 2006 team is way too forgotten and not talked about enough from Clipper Nation. And without the 2001 team, we never would have had the 2006 team. So I would say the most underrated Clippers team ever is that 2005-2006 team, but they'd be nothing without the first Clipper team, I think, ever in franchise history to be cool. And that was 2001. When they had Darius Miles, Quentin Richardson, Corey Maggette, Elton Brand. They were young, gunning, high-flying. It was the first time they really got close to 500 in the more modern era. Yes, there was moments where they had blips where Doc Rivers led the team as a player to the playoffs. But that was a crazy time, too, because they couldn't play the game in their stadium because of the LA riots. And so this is coming off. The important thing about that 2006 team is that it's coming off of Sports Illustrated calling them the worst franchise in sports history with a cover shot of Clipper fans with paper bags on their heads. And so finally in 2001, they have this young core of Elton Brand, Lamar Odom, Darius Miles, Knuckleheads, Quentin Richardson, and Corey Maggette. And all of a sudden they're cool. And you see Clippers jerseys in Cameron music videos. And you never saw that before. And I apparently there's a story where Shaquille O'Neal was in a Clippers jersey and pulled over either Q Rich or Darius Miles on his way to a game. And even Shaq was a Clipper fan in that moment. So 2001 team should be up there as one of the more underrated teams. However, 2006 actually won. 2001, they got close to 500, but they couldn't quite get over the hump. In 2005, 2006, we lost Darius Miles. We traded him for Andre Miller, who was a classic bust for us. But the big cog in that 2006 team was getting Sam Cassell and his veteran leadership And I always was a huge fan of Mike Dunleavy. I remember as a season ticket holder before I started, there were no podcasts back then. So I couldn't start Clipcast because it would have been called a radio show. And I'm too handsome for radio. You and I are too handsome for radio. So, but we can do podcasts. But I remember being a season ticket holder and I saw Mike Dunleavy, who was coming off of his Trailblazers coaching, and he wasn't coaching for anybody. And he was sitting in the front row. And I lean over to my best friend and broadcasting partner, Henry Dittman, Burbank Hank, and I'm like, holy crap, that's Mike Dunleavy. I think we're going to get Coach Mike Dunleavy. And Coach Mike Dunleavy changed everything. He's just this old blue collar, like wears like a blazer with the elbow patches. You know what I mean? He's just like, he looks like he should be a detective. He's a real guy. And he came in and he got Cassell, and he led that team to the first ever playoff series win ever. That's so crazy because Buffalo Braves were pretty good back in the day, but they kept knocking teeth with the Boston Celtics, who kept beating them. And back then, the Buffalo Braves would do so well that they would get a bye through the first round and automatically make it to the second round and then lose to the Boston Celtics. So they never won a series ever.
Yeah.
And something that's really cool about 2006 that I was thinking about, it was like hip to clip. So I remember I was a big Late Show with David Letterman fan. Bruce Willis was on Letterman in 2006. And he said, just like a throwaway line, I'd rather be at home on the couch watching the Clippers. He literally said that. And this is peak Bruce Willis movie star. Talking about a diehard Clipper fan. This guy's the star of Die Hard, and he's literally dropping Clippers on Letterman. And so in 2006, I'm at the playoff games, and I'm a Jumbotron moron, public jackass, and I'm on the Jumbotron. But literally, like, they cut from me chugging my beer, taking my shirt off, to like Matthew Lillard, the star of Scooby-Doo, to Bruce Willis, the star of Die Hard. I mean, we had mega stars at this game. Michael Clark Duncan used to go to every game.
He was a huge Clipper fan, MCB.
Massive Clipper fan. And that's because of 2006. And that's because of Sam Cassell, Elton Brand, and this guy, Chris Wylde.
So 2006 that was great stuff right there. 2006 is the reason I'm a Clipper fan. I was a 7-year-old kid.
Yes.
And just getting into basketball, just going out at school playing and then going home and watching. And, you obviously have a choice living in Los Angeles if you want to support local Clippers and Lakers. And at that time, everybody asked me, why are you a Clipper fan? Kobe was amazing at that time, just amazing, but he didn't really have a supporting cast that was that exciting. His second best player was Lamar Odom, but after that, it was a huge drop off. It was like Luke Walton was their third best player. Kwame Brown, Smush Parker starting in that lineup, while the Clippers, while not having that superstar in a Kobe, had a bona fide star, Elton Brand, who I'm guessing we're going to talk about a lot more as this episode goes on. But then you have Sam Cassell, Chris Kaman, Corey Maggette, Quentin Ross, who was as great an on-ball defender at that time as you can find in the league. And then you had, I don't know if I mentioned Corey, but Corey coming off the bench, Sean Livingston, who was young and exciting.
Absolutely. Cat Mobley.
Oh, yeah. How could I forget? Coutinho Mobley.
Mid-season trade, Vlad Radmanovich.
For Chris Wilcox. That was huge. I remember that. And so the Clippers.
I loved C. Weezy. I was sorry to let him go.
Yeah, but the Clippers, as you said, it was really Sam Cassell traded for Marko Jaric, I believe, coming over from Minnesota. And in
that makes sense.
Yeah, in that first game against Seattle, he showed everybody right away what we were getting. And that guy, number 19 for our Clippers, Sam Cassell, loved, in my opinion, but this is the reason why I say the most underrated team in Clipper history. The reason why I call them that is because it's very clear that when Lob City came around, the Clipper fan base just grew exponentially. Like a lot of people on Twitter, kids my age, a little younger, a lot of them became fans during Lob City. So that period in between 06 and Lob City, a lot of people it's the diehards, the OGs. And, even though I'm a younger guy, I would consider myself still in that OG category because that 06 team, the games were not sold out very much.
Playoff games were, but not the regular season. Absolutely.
Yeah, but you just saw how solid this Clipper team. It was a mix of a couple young guys, but mostly experienced guys. And Elton Brand really hit his peak. But Sam Cassell, you look at his track record, wherever he's been, Houston, winning as a young player, having a big role in those championship teams. And you got New Jersey, Milwaukee, Minnesota, the Clippers, everywhere he went, he helped win. Guy's just a winner. But coming up, every single good Clipper story usually ends with a rough one. We're going to be talking about why.
What happened in the playoffs, I was there, man.
And why the Clippers fell short in the second round. Going to talk about that coming up. You ever sat in the classroom and thought, man, this teacher is boring? Well, you don't have to worry about that on Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best minds anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. You can learn how to learn the art of songwriting with John Legend, the power of personal branding with Chris Jenner, with over 180 classes from a range of world-class instructors that the thing you've always wanted to do is closer than you think. It's not even necessary to sit down and consume a whole class. You can even just listen for 10 minutes and you will know a lot more than you did before you watched the video. I highly recommend you check it out this holiday. Give one annual membership and get one free. Go to masterclass.com/lockedon today. That's masterclass.com/lockedon. Terms apply. It's accessible on your phone, web, or smart TV with classes on a wide variety of topics, all taught by world-class instructors at the top of their fields. That's Masterclass. All right. So 06 Clippers, they finished 47-35. Before we talk about why the team, kind of fell a little short, I want to ask you, since you were actually a fan before the season began and I kind of joined during the season, what was the expectation going into the season? The Clippers hadn't finished over 500 since 91-92. So what was the expectation going into the season with Sam Cassell?
Well, you're looking at a son of a lifelong Cubs fan, which I think is subconsciously why when I moved to Los Angeles in 98, I adopted the Clippers. I also am from New Jersey, so the Nets and the Devils always kind of lived in the Knicks and Rangers shadow.
Right.
So you go into that season 05-06 and you've got some really good pieces, but you are just still a world-weary Clipper fan who hasn't won in decades, like you just said. And at that point, you just don't have any expectations. You always hope for the best and expect the worst. And I'm an optimist, but I still was like, hey, I'm just going to go to these games and have a good time. I became a season ticket holder in 2002.
Oh, nice.
And I remember that season I said, look, that season was kind of a bust. We like I said, we had Andre Miller. It didn't work for us. We lost Darius Miles. That kind of broke up our young core of guys, but they still stayed for a few seasons, but I just saw us just sputtering. And all I was wanting for those first 4 years I was a season ticket holder going into 06, I just wanted to win at home. So I'm going to these home games expecting very little. I just want to win at home. I just want to be 500 at home. Never mind on the road, all in. I just want to be over 500 at home. And the year before, I don't have the data off the top of my head, but I think we started to finally figure out how to win at home. We get Mike Dunleavy. He starts instituting winning ways. Sam Cassell is the biggest piece of all. I totally agree with what you said. And so all of a sudden we start winning at home, and then we start winning on the road. So the expectations were never high because we were the worst franchise in sports, according to Sports Illustrated. So the expectations were not super high. However, we started winning at home. We started getting excited. We started seeing megawatt celebrities sitting courtside, more than just Malcolm in the Middle. We were really excited.
Shout out to Frankie Muniz. Haven't seen him at a Clipper game. What's going on? Did he jump up the bandwagon?
He's like a race car driver now or something, and he looks exactly the same. So Kaman and Brand, the two of them were the highest scoring and rebounding tandem in the NBA. And without those two cornerstone guys, none of that happens. And Dunleavy put those pieces together. Dunleavy's the one who drafted Kaman, I'm pretty sure. Chris Kaman, I think, may be the most underrated Clipper of all time.
He's trending in that category at this point. I mean, no, people talk about him like he's a joke now, but people don't remember how talented he actually was.
And he really played well with Elton Brand. Elton Brand and him together specifically, those two guys. And I don't think Brand had a marginal success after, sort of. But Brand and Kamen's best years were definitely together and with the Clippers. I think, honestly, the most disappointed I ever was as a Clipper fan. Well, that's not true. But one of the most disappointed I ever was the following season when we didn't make the playoffs. That was a huge heartbreaker.
I cried. I remember. I was 8 years old.
But I was 8 years old. Absolutely.
We cried. I mean, I cried because I remember we lost to the Hornets at the last day of the season. But talking about 05-06, when did you believe that we were going to make the playoffs? Because I remember going to a game, and I think it was January or February against the Lakers, and we beat them by 20. And I remember thinking to myself, going into that game, I was already rooting for the Clippers, but that was when I was sealed for life. I was like, this is my squad. Elton Brand, they had no answer for him. I guess
that was back when it mattered who won division, and we actually tanked a game so that we could play Denver.
I was going to get into that.
And it wasn't best of 7 round 1.
It was still best of 7 round 1 at that point.
But we literally intentionally lost a game to match up against Denver,
right?
Who we then beat in 6?
5.
Okay.
So
and we did it at home. We won the series at home. I think that was the happiest that I've ever been in life up until that point. It's like winning the series in 06. Game 6 with Terrence Mann getting into the Western Conference Finals.
Wow, you would put Game 5 against Denver over the Terrence game?
I would say those are the two, and then the birth of my son, the 3 happiest points of my life. Because I honestly, Game 6 was phenomenal because of the comeback element. I want to say Game 5, we kind of had that game. The whole we had that game in the bag. We wanted Denver. We went out and got Denver. And then Lob City was such a weird thing. I don't want to talk too much about Lob City, but the most frustrating thing about Lob City is they refused to win a series in less than 7. It was so frustrating.
We played against some great teams. I mean, that's happens when you get a seed like that. The Lob City only got up to a 3 seed, and we're playing against, what's interesting though? The series that we would have won easily with Lob City was that 2016 series against the Blazers when Chris Paul and Blake got injured at the same time. We had those guys in the bag. Those guys couldn't handle it.
Brutal. That was the Austin Rivers knockout game, right? Yeah.
So going back to the 2016 though,
the crazy thing about 2006,
yeah,
the Phoenix Suns beat the LA Lakers in 7, and then the very next round beat the LA Clippers in 7. And I want to say the Lakers had an edge. They were up 3-1. They were up 3-1 in the series. The Lakers are up 3-1. The whole city is electric because it's finally going to happen. LA round 2. It's in the bag. And then the Lakers blow it up 3-1, which you got to love. This is the most Clipper thing ever, Darian. Clipper Darryl calls me on his flip phone. This is 2006. He says, "Hey, baby, it's me, Clipper Darryl. I got 2 extras to Phoenix. What was it? Game 5.
Oh,
we lost in triple overtime.
It was double overtime.
Triple, baby.
No way.
Triple overtime, dude.
It was double.
It was triple.
I have the fact check down. I have the game on right now. I have the game.
So, the coolest thing about that game, it sucked losing, right?
Right. Lost double overtime, 118 to 125.
Double?
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it. I
just looked it up.
So the coolest thing about that game was obviously Jack Nicholson is a massive Laker homer and is on the floor of every game. I guess classically, he would literally tell the movie sets he was on, I will not work during Laker home games. In Phoenix, Jack Nicholson is on the floor sitting next to James L. Brooks, who is arguably the biggest Clipper fan of all time. Multiple Academy Awards, this guy, multiple Emmys. He's the executive producer of The Simpsons. He directed movies like Broadcast News, Terms of Endearment. So James L. Brooks is on the floor sitting next to Jack Nicholson in Phoenix for that I'm just learning double overtime game. Henry and I drove out to Phoenix to go to that game. Henry played psychological mind games with Phoenix fans and actually got a Phoenix fan kicked out of a home game for being rude to us. But anyway, that game was the craziest game, the most heartbreaking game, the most thrilling game. At that point, that kind of dictated the series from that point on. I think we went back and won at home, and then they won at home in 7. But it was just so brutal, that double overtime loss. And then literally, as opposed to like, we just literally took our tails between our legs and drove home from Phoenix that night, as opposed to get a room and party, because we were just so, oh my gosh, are you kidding? I think it was Daniel Ewing or Bell. Somebody.
It was Daniel Ewing.
Daniel Ewing. And then, of course, the Sam Cassell didn't get the ball over the half-court line during that game. So that was absolutely brutal. That was one of the most devastating losses. The only other, I think the most devastating loss in Clipper history was Game 6 versus Houston. James Harden's Houston, because we had a massive lead during that game.
We were so much better than them.
We were so much better than them. Yeah. I think that's the toughest loss ever in Clipper history. But I want to say the second toughest loss in Clipper history has got to be that double overtime at Phoenix, because that was the series right there.
Yeah, I guess we're going to go more in depth about it coming up. Let me tell you something about Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. And coming up, there's nothing that's going to be bet on more throughout the world than the World Cup. Obviously, you know me, going to be boarding my plane on Thursday to Qatar. And they're very interesting lines with soccer. The spreads are really interesting. But USA and Wales, the money line is plus 168 for the U.S. against Wales, plus 205 for Wales. If I had to place a safe bet, Argentina is -2 against Saudi Arabia in their opening game on November the 22nd. I would place the bet on that. Considering Argentina is 35 matches unbeaten, I would place a safe bet on them to win, and probably win by 2 goals. If you want to go to Bet Online and bet, go to Bet Online and bet. You can get the app, or you can do it online. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football, basketball, soccer, and esports. They've got it all on betonline.net. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Just head to the website today, or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, so Elton Brand was unreal in this season. I know a lot of Clipper fans have
should have been MVP. He should have been MVP.
Wow, you really think so?
I do. I really do. I think Elton Brand should have been MVP of the entire league that season, because
Kobe and LeBron had such great seasons and they didn't win. I mean, obviously, 81 points was amazing. LeBron's averages were amazing, but Nash ended up winning. But continue. I'll still go for the Elton Brand propaganda here. I'm not one of the haters, because he made me a fan. He's partially part of the reason I'm a fan. So I can't really hate too much.
Kobe Bryant did not win the MVP that year, and his team got knocked out in round 1, and he's playing with Smush Parker and blah, blah, blah. I want to say that the Lakers, I would guess, probably had a worse record than the Clippers.
So here's I'll give you the scenario right now. So going back to the comment you made about the tanking. So back in the day, in this time, division still mattered, right? So the Denver Nuggets won a very poor Northwest division with a record of, I think, 43-39. The Clippers were 47-35 and lost a game, I believe, on purpose to the Grizzlies.
100%.
So we could avoid the Grizzlies or the Mavericks in the first round. And the Grizzlies and the Mavericks played each other in round 1. And because the Mavericks were second in their own division, but they had 60 wins, they had the second most wins in the league. I'm sorry, I don't know if it was between them and Detroit, but they were top 3 in wins. They had 60 wins, and they finished 4th and swept the Grizzlies in 4 quick games, while the Clippers got the 6th seed, even though they had the 5th best record in the West, and played against the Denver Nuggets team, who actually had a worse record than the 7th-seeded Lakers. So in actuality, the Clippers had the 5th best record in the West, and the Lakers had the 6th best record in the West. But the Clippers played against the 3-seed Denver Nuggets, who actually had the 7th best record in the West and had home court advantage in the series as a 6th seed. And we wiped them off the floor in 5 games. Kenyon Martin had a whole thing with George Karl in that series and stopped playing games. But that Clipper team was too deep for them. And Carmelo didn't really scare me at all at that point. Really, no. Elton Brand was the best player in the series.
I'm telling you, Elton Brand should have been MVP of the league that year, because he led that Clippers ragtag franchise. I'm not talking about this because the team was pretty good around him, but he led that ragtag franchise to their first ever. And I know it's most valuable player of the regular season.
I mean, he averaged 25 and 10 with 2.5 blocks in the regular season on 53% shooting.
That's
insane.
He's
at that time.
Yes, and he's a two-way player. That's why I think he was the most valuable player, because he's giving you the offense and he is backing it up on defense, and he's taking big, dumb, idiot, shaved ape Chris Kaman and making him an all-star caliber player. What you don't know, or maybe you remember, Darian, because you're a crazy person, but what maybe the listener doesn't remember is Chris Kaman, they did a Before the Bigs documentary.
Oh, that was great stuff. I missed those, man.
He literally took a can of cold soup, a can of Campbell's cold soup and a can opener, and opened it up and drank it like a beverage. The guy's a monster. He's from Michigan. He crawled out of the backwoods and the hills of Michigan. And we used to literally call him Cold Soup. That was our nickname for Captain K-Man. Cold Soup. Elton Brand took this just a piece of clay and molded him into a premier NBA center, a true NBA center. And that was all Elton Brand and Mike Dunleavy. So I think Elton Brand should have been the MVP that year because of his defensive prowess, because of the numbers you just talked about. He had offense and defense. And then because of what he did for that hobbled franchise. And yes, Sam Cassell helped. And yes, Cat Mobley helped. And yes, Mike Dunleavy helped. But it was Elton Brand's team. He was the star and the stud. I was always a big advocate of Elton Brand being MVP. I would be interested to know if he got any second place or third place votes, honestly.
Look that
probably did.
No, he definitely did. I think he finished 10th or 8th in MVP voting that year. I was having an argument about Elton Brand's best year versus Blake's best year with some people. And personally, as much as I love Blake Griffin, and he may be my favorite Clipper of all time, I think Elton, because of his two-way prowess, so much better at defense, and I liked him on the glass, and his mid-range was so good. I preferred Elton. I think Elton Brand in 06 was better than any Blake year. That may be a hot take, though. I know somebody disagree.
Well, he also was, obviously he had that one horrible missed season with an injury for us, but he was, and then he went to Philadelphia and got injured over there. So, but his glass joeyiness was not a massive problem for us, like Blake's glass joeyiness was a massive problem for us, and Chris Paul's glass joeyiness was a massive problem for us. So there's something to say about that.
By the way, 7th in MVP voting for Elton Brand in that 06 season. And I also want to note to others, like the people in front of him are like insane names, like Nash, LeBron, Kobe, Dirk, who led the team to 60 wins. Chauncey Billups led the Pistons to 64 wins. And even though I love Chauncey Billups, former Clipper, coach and player, I think he had a really great supporting cast. I don't think individually in the regular season he had a better year than Elton. And then Dwayne Wade, who was just, ended up going to win the championship, was just electric. But, you also, we have to mention, too, the competition at the power forward spot in the 2000s that Elton was playing against. Pau Gasol, Dirk Nowitzki, Tim Duncan, Amari Stoudemire, Kevin Garnett. Yeah. It was just Zach Randolph, Rasheed Wallace. You can just keep going. The names are incredible.
I think Sheed is my favorite non-Clipper of all time.
Really?
I love Rasheed Wallace, man.
So many great names. And then, so you talk about the Denver series. I never felt that's the only series in Clipper history to this day where I feel like I was confident that we were going to win and we won it without giving me a heart attack. Like legitimately.
What was so since then, what's the quickest series we've ever had? 6, right?
Against the Mavericks in the bubble, and that gave me a heart attack.
And then we won in 6 when we got to our Western Conference Finals.
Right, but that series was a panic mode.
Oh my God.
We were down 2-0.
It's terrifying.
But yeah, so we go to Phoenix, and so Phoenix, you mentioned the 3-1. When Kobe made that game-winning shot in Game 4, I was like, "Oh my God, are the Lakers actually about to do this? Like, is Kobe about to get these guys out of the first round?" And then Game 6 in LA, a game that's a NBA classic at this point. Kobe has 50 points. The Lakers are right there. And then Lamar Odom doesn't get a rebound. Sean Marion grabs an offensive board, kicks it out to Tim Thomas. Kwame Brown flies by, and Tim Thomas hits the game-tying 3 that quieted the crowd with around 3 seconds left. and the Lakers lost in overtime.
And Tim Thomas killed the Clippers in round 2. And then the next summer, what do? We go out and get him.
Sign him.
He stinks. And he stinks for us.
Tim Thomas, it's funny because I felt like he was worse in the moment. And then I looked back at the numbers a couple weeks ago and I was like, okay, they're not that different from Phoenix, but it just felt different because he had a bigger role with the Clippers. Whereas with Phoenix, he could just be a spot up stretch four. And it's funny, like a guy of that skill set, he would have fit in perfectly with today's game, just as a stretch. He was playing stretch four early. And that's when I really realized how great Nash was, that he made him look so even better than he actually was. That was the brilliance of Steve Nash.
A hell of a player, not much of a coach. Watch out.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Somebody got fired.
Yeah. So
why
second
the
round.
hell did they give him that head? I understand why they gave him the head coaching gig in Brooklyn. And this is not Locked On Nets. However, with those volatile personalities, why in God's name wouldn't you get a tried and true, world-weary, been through everything head coach and not a first timer? You're out of your mind.
I think the players probably had more of a say in that than we realize.
Sure.
So going to the Suns series, though, to close it out, I mean, I didn't expect to beat Phoenix, but I knew we had a chance.
Sure.
We smacked them up in game 2. And game 3 was the tough one where Steve Nash hit a game winner. I went to game 1 against the Nuggets in this playoffs. That was the only game I went to in the playoffs that year for us.
Okay.
It was awesome, obviously. That's when the term Clipper Nation, I believe, got coined with that shirt.
They gave us T-shirts. It said Clipper Nation. I still got a couple of those.
Yeah, and then so we go down 2-1 when Nash hits that game winner, tie up the series, and then obviously game 5. The fact that you were there is amazing. I haven't met anyone that was actually there.
Oh, yeah. Me, Henry, Clipper Darrell, and James L. Brooks. There were literally 4 Clipper fans in that building, and you could see us. We all stuck out like sore thumbs. So if you ever, James L. Brooks, if you ever run into him, you can talk to him about it. Clipper Darrell, and then me and Hank. We were the 4 guys that were there. It was crazy. What's nuts is like Hank will tell you, like, while we're driving to Phoenix, he's like, he literally was like, we were making these bold predictions, and he was like, what if the game goes to double overtime so we get that much more basketball? And then all of a sudden, like literally the first overtime happens. He's like, oh my God, I hate myself for predicting this. And then double overtime happens. He's like, oh my God, I hate myself for predicting this. I'm like, it's okay. We're going to win. We're going to win. We're going to win. And then we lost. That was a brutal heartbreaker. I don't remember what our home record in the playoffs was, but it was pretty damn good. I don't think we lost.
3-0 in the first round. We were 5-1. We were 5-1.
That's what I'm saying, man. That's what I'm saying, man. We were 5-1 for a team that never did anything in the playoffs. That is really outstanding.
Yeah, and to talk about that game 5 a little bit, the obvious famous thing, Sam Cassell's 8-second violation, so uncharacteristic of him, just laughing up the court, got the 8-second call. And that being said,
was it legitimate? Was it a legitimate missed 8-second?
I have to go back and see it. I think it was an 8-second violation.
No, I know it was an 8-second violation, but I wonder if like today they would have reviewed it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Because I remember being there and being like, are you kidding? What are you talking about?
It was so late in the game. And then the crazy part is, Clippers still were up 3. That the forever questionable decision to put small guard Daniel Ewing in the game, I'm not sure about.
Horrible. And I think that's what broke fans on Dunleavy, honestly.
Yeah, because they turned on him.
Next year, the 2 years later, that they were chanting fire
Dunleavy. See, man, I love when I get to talk to a Clipper fan that's really been through it. Like, you remember these things at the games. Like,
I'm literally yelling, fire Dunleavy. What are you talking about? He's our best coach. Like, what are you? Larry Brown is the only one who's like anywhere near him.
So that corner 3, man, I can still remember myself on my parents' bed watching him, Raja Bell, who I still to this day I cannot stand him.
Oh, yeah.
He gave the Lakers and the Clippers fits.
You know what really pissed me off too is that the Suns didn't then go on and win it all. Like that seriously.
Well, I don't think that they were serious. I don't think that's why I thought we were going to win. I didn't feel they were that serious. That was the year that Mari Stoudemire was out. They played such fast basketball and shot a bunch of threes, and their defense was so questionable. Elton Brand and Chris Kaman had their way with them at times in that series. Like,
right.
For Raja Bell.
So the Western Conference Finals that year was like Dallas Phoenix.
Yeah, and I thought Dallas would win. After beating San Antonio, I was like, Dallas is taking this. I thought they were going to win the whole thing, but they didn't. And then the game tying 3, you just knew that the Clippers weren't weren't going to win that game after that because the momentum is probably it was so much in Phoenix's
They did this
favor.
amazing thing in the playoffs that year, which I don't understand why they didn't do this ever again. So on the scorers table, they have this like, now it's a digital sign, so I think that's why they don't do it. But they had an actual like sign that had a 16, 15, 14, a countdown to the NBA championship. And after every win, Sam Cassell would take a can of spray paint and do a big X through the number of games. And that was such a cool thing. I'll never forget that. Sam Cassell taking the can of spray paint and doing the big X through 16, 15, 14. So I guess we went to game 7 in round 2. So so we were only 9 wins away from the Larry OB, but it eluded us once again.
And it's funny because that second round loss, that heartbreaker to Phoenix in game 5, was the start of what I didn't realize was going to be a long drought of not only a conference finals appearance, but
winning
second
season.
round. That too, but I didn't realize the second round heartbreaks we'd face after that. I thought that was going to be the worst, but we got topped over 3 times. The Chris Paul debacle in Oklahoma City, the Houston one you mentioned earlier, and then obviously the bubble, which was maybe even worse than all of them combined.
Yeah.
That Phoenix, that game 5, when you look back at the team, it's really like, I'd have to go back and watch the film to go through like what we lost, why we lost X's and O's wise, but it's really, if Raja Bell misses that one shot, if maybe we get a better contest on that
if we win that double overtime game,
we
then
probably win in game 6.
We go to Western Conference Finals versus Dallas and literally win, lose, or draw. Who cares? Because we get to our first Final Four ever, and it changes the fortunes of the franchise. But I will always tip my cap to Mike Dunleavy for getting us as far as he did, and also for drafting DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin. There
we go. Yeah. Daniel Ewing, he didn't really jump on that contest. It was just he put his hands up and Raja Bell got a pretty clear look. It's a heartbreaker, but as Clipper fans, we're used to it. At the end of the day, the memories from that team are so strong. For me, the most underrated team in Clipper history. Chris,
that's one of your big formidable memories as a young kid growing up in Los Angeles is that team. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was the team that got me hooked for life. I mean, I love that team. I'd say after the 2021 team, since they did break that second round curse, I would say they're my second favorite Clipper team. Even though Lob City, I was so obsessed with them, and each year had the optimism. I think there's no one particular Lob City team that I would like over that 2016 because I ended each Lob City year for the most part with a disappointment at the end. Whereas with them, I wasn't disappointed. I did try.
This Clippers team, what they did in game 6, Terrence Mann, Reggie Jackson, Patrick Beverly. Obviously, Pat's not on the team anymore. And then, of course, Paul George. Like, I love these guys. I love this current group. And I think the only team that would rival that for me is that 06 squad, which was begat by that knucklehead 01 squad, which is why I became a Clipper lifer as a young person. Not as young as you, but I went to that. My buddy bought a new tire. And for every new tire you bought, you got a Clippers ticket in the nosebleeds. So I went to my first ever Clipper game because he bought 4 tires and we went on a double date and I sat in the nosebleeds. And I remember going to Laker games rooting for the away team. I went to the NBA Finals and found myself rooting for Indiana Pacers, for God's sake, over the Lakers. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why do I hate this Laker team? And then the very next year, I go to my first ever Clipper game and see the knuckleheads because of the tire. And I fell in love with that team. And then I became a season ticket holder 2002, 2003. I've been at basically every home game since. And I love this team. So yes, 06, the most underrated Clipper Nation team ever.
The passion is coming through the airwaves. Chris, let people know where they can hear more from you.
Oh, by all means, follow us at LA Clipcast on Twitter or Instagram. Please subscribe, 5-star or maybe 4-star. Our podcast, Clipcast, the longest running Clipper podcast in the history of all time.
There we go. And of course, remember to follow and subscribe, or should I say subscribe to Locked On Clippers on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod, and you can subscribe to my own YouTube channel known as Dime Dropper. Make sure you comment on today's pinned question. Who do you think is the most underrated Clipper team of all time? Do you agree with us? Do you want to go with another team? I would love to hear. Everybody, you already know how it is. I'll be back soon from Qatar, but until then, go Clippers.
Let's go, Clips.